Have you ever agreed to something you never actually wanted to do? Not because someone threatened you, not because they forced you, but because somehow saying yes felt easier than saying no. Maybe it was covering a coworker's shift, buying something you didn't need, staying in a relationship long after you knew it wasn't right, or simply keeping quiet because everyone else seemed to agree. If you've ever looked back on one of those moments and wondered, why did I do that? The answer may be uncomfortable, because your brain wasn't making the decision you thought it was. We like to imagine ourselves as rational creatures. We picture ourselves carefully weighing evidence, considering every option, then arriving at the best possible conclusion. But psychology paints a much stranger picture. Most of the time, your mind isn't searching for truth. It's searching for shortcuts. It wants to save energy. It wants certainty. It wants to avoid conflict. And because of that, it relies on invisible mental rules that usually work well enough, but sometimes can be manipulated with terrifying precision. What's fascinating is that these shortcuts don't just influence salespeople or politicians. They shape friendships, relationships, careers, financial decisions, even the way you see yourself. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on some of the most powerful psychological effects ever discovered. Not because they're interesting trivia, but because once you recognize them, you'll start seeing them everywhere. And once you see them, it's almost impossible to become blind to them again. Imagine someone walking up to you and asking a ridiculous favor. Could you volunteer every weekend for the next 2 years? Most people laugh. Absolutely not. Then the person smiles. Fair enough. Could you at least help us for one Saturday? Suddenly, that doesn't sound unreasonable anymore. 5 seconds earlier, giving up your Saturday sounded ridiculous. Now it somehow feels generous. Nothing about the second request changed. Only your point of comparison did. Psychologists call this the door-in-the-face technique, and it remains one of the most reliable persuasion strategies ever studied. Robert Cialdini and his colleagues demonstrated it decades ago with a simple experiment. Participants were first asked to mentor juvenile offenders for 2 years. Almost everyone refused. Then came a much smaller request. Would they simply supervise one trip to the zoo? Compared to the first request, the zoo suddenly felt tiny. The number of people agreeing jumped dramatically. The fascinating part isn't that people change their minds, it's why. Your brain rarely judges something in isolation. Instead, it compares. A glass of warm water feels hot after holding ice. The exact same water feels cold after holding coffee. Reality stays the same, but another force is quietly operating underneath. When someone lowers their request after you've rejected them, it feels as though they've compromised, and compromise triggers one of humanity's oldest social instincts, reciprocity. They gave something up, now you feel like you should too, even when the entire negotiation was planned from the beginning. You've probably seen children use this instinct without ever learning psychology. Can I have a puppy? No. Okay, then can I just get a hamster? Parents sigh. Fine. The puppy was never the goal, it was the setup. The uncomfortable lesson is this. Sometimes what feels reasonable isn't actually reasonable. It's simply less unreasonable than whatever came immediately before. And your brain mistakes relief for logic. Now imagine something much smaller. A coworker you've barely spoken to walks in one morning carrying 2 coffees. One is for you. You never asked. They smile. No worries. You thank them. The coffee costs almost nothing. But something strange has already happened. A tiny invisible debt has appeared inside your mind. Days later, they ask if you can cover their shift. You hesitate. You don't really want to, yet saying no suddenly feels uncomfortable. Why? Because your brain has been keeping score. This is the rule of reciprocity, and psychologists consider it one of the strongest social forces ever discovered. Dennis Regan demonstrated this in an experiment that seems almost too simple. Participants were sitting in a room when another person unexpectedly bought them a soda. Later, that same person asked if they'd buy raffle tickets. People who received the soda bought roughly twice as many tickets. Here's the disturbing part. It didn't matter whether they actually liked the person. The favor worked anyway. Think about that. A tiny act of kindness can influence your future decisions, even when you don't particularly trust or enjoy the person offering it. Because reciprocity evolved long before modern civilization. For early humans, survival depended on mutual cooperation. I help you hunt today. You help me tomorrow. Without that instinct, communities wouldn't have survived. The problem is, the same psychological wiring that once built civilization can now be exploited by marketers, advertisers, and anyone who understands human behavior. Why do stores hand out free samples? Why do charities sometimes send unsolicited gifts before asking for donations? Why does the waiter place a mint beside your bill? None of those actions are random. They're activating the oldest accounting system inside your brain. And unlike your actual bank account, this one isn't very good at math. A 5-cent mint can increase a $5 tip. A free sample worth $1 can convince someone to spend $50. Because the emotional pressure to repay isn't calculated logically, it's felt emotionally. The next time someone offers you something for free, pause for just 1 second. Ask yourself one question. Is this generosity, or is this an investment expecting returns? Sometimes it's genuine kindness. Sometimes you're already halfway through a negotiation you never realized had started. Now picture yourself walking through a city you've never visited. 2 restaurants sit side by side. One is completely empty. The host stands awkwardly near the entrance, hoping someone walks in. The other has a line stretching onto the sidewalk. Without thinking, which one do you choose? Almost everyone joins the line. Not because they've tasted the food, not because they've compared menus, simply because everyone else already made the decision. This is social proof, one of the most powerful shortcuts your brain possesses. When information is limited, people become information. Psychologist Robert Cialdini showed that uncertainty dramatically increases our tendency to copy others. Your brain quietly assumes something astonishingly simple. If everyone else believes this is correct, it's probably correct. Most of the time, that shortcut works. If everyone in your ancient village suddenly started running, we didn't stop to investigate. You ran first. Questions could come later. The people who insisted on independent verification often became lunch. Evolution rewarded imitation. Modern life exploits it. Online reviews, follower counts, bestseller labels, crowded clubs, long restaurant lines. Even laughter. Have you ever noticed how much funnier a joke becomes when everyone else is laughing? The joke didn't change. Your social brain did. And here's the paradox. Sometimes the crowd has absolutely no idea what it's doing. Imagine everyone joins the line simply because everyone else joined the line. Nobody actually knows whether the restaurant is good. They're trusting strangers, who are trusting strangers, who are trusting strangers. Entire markets have crashed because of this. Financial bubbles, fashion trends, internet outrage, panic buying. History is filled with moments where millions of intelligent people copied one another straight into disaster. The herd isn't stupid. It's simply efficient. But efficiency isn't the same thing as truth. Every once in a while, the empty restaurant really is the better one. The quieter opinion really is the wiser one. And the hardest psychological skill you can develop is learning when to listen to the crowd and when to politely walk in the opposite direction.